Are you looking for inspiration on a daily basis? Then check out Deal to Heal Teas. With our inspirational teas, you're sure to find something to inspire you. That's dealtohealteas.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.com. Again, that's dealtohealteas.com. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you enjoy the Girl Dad Discussion podcast. I'm your host, Ernest James, and I believe the relationship between a daughter and her father is one of the most important relationships a young lady can have. And therefore, my mission is to promote the daddy-daughter relationship by sharing the voices of girl dads to the world. So check out our podcast on every platform where podcasts can be listened to. And if you want to watch the podcast, check us out on our YouTube channel. Again, that's the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with your host, Ernest James. Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Ernest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure that you listen, like, subscribe, and share our podcast on all of your social media platforms and all your podcast listening platforms. And also check out our new YouTube channel. We have officially crossed over, right? So we changed the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast channel to the Deal to Heal podcasting network, because now you can find the Deal to Heal podcast on that channel, as well as our sister podcast, which is the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. And we also have 2 other podcasts in production right now and some more to come. So we have changed it to the Deal to Heal podcasting network on YouTube. So make sure you guys go there and subscribe. And again, check out our partner podcast, the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with E. James, on our YouTube channel and on all of your other podcast listening platforms. Also, I'm going to tell you guys how you can win $100 from the podcast, but you got to stay until the end of the episode in order to get that information. So next thing we want to talk about is our product of the week. As you guys know, we are a self-sustained podcast, and the way that we pay our bills and do what we need to do is by bringing you guys amazing products for you to buy. That way we can keep our bills paid. So our product of the week, we actually have 2 this week, which is our purpose journal, as well as our purpose planner, our purpose journal and our purpose planner, to help you create the purpose in your life that you need and also keep track of it, right? And so that can be found on Amazon. Actually, the link will be in the descriptions below. So make sure you guys go there. Also, you can go to our main page, which is the dealhealfulfill.org page, and our page for our inspirational teas and our ebooks, which we'll get into a little bit later and give you the information for those. So, so let's jump right in it. Today, just like any other day, we are blessed with the guest, Miss Drea. How are you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
I am well. First of all, let me say thank you for being here because you could have been doing anything else with anyone else, but you're here with me and my listeners, and we definitely appreciate it. So do me a favor, Drea. We're gonna jump right in it. Do me a favor, introduce yourself to my listeners. Tell us who you are and a little bit about what you do.
I don't know why this question is always like shocking when someone. Well, I'm Drea. I'm a mother of two boys. I also have a daughter from another mother and father. Um, I'm the founder of Glass Houses and Paper Mache Lives. I'm also the author of a devotional journal called Undressing. I'm a champion for the broken beautifully. That's also another part of my brand that I've dedicated to women when they go through trials and troubles, that they really use that time to allow themselves to be transformed and come out better. Um, I'm also a recipient of God's grace. He's been walking with me well before I intentionally started walking with him. And I'm also one of the many people out here trying to normalize vulnerability and encouraging people to find their true selves and find freedom in the truth. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
me.
that's good. That's good. I definitely am a champion of vulnerability. I'm an open book pretty much on
Mm-hmm.
here. Talk about. I try not to talk about stuff that's, or I try not to talk about too much of other people's stuff
Mm-hmm.
who may be connected to me. But as far as me, I just tell everything. So, so I'm very vulnerable. I talk about the things that I've been through as far as depression and suicidal ideations and all those things that my listeners have heard my story plenty of times. So I'm very big on vulnerability because
Yeah,
I think when you're vulnerable, it gives the person you're talking to permission to be vulnerable also.
absolutely.
And especially as men in the men circle, that's a big thing because we always trying to save face amongst each other. But when we're able to put down our guards and say, look, this is what I dealt with and this
Yeah.
is what I'm dealing with, then it gives the other person permission to share as well. And a lot of times that's just what we need. You
Yeah.
know, we need to get some things off our chest. But enough about me. We're not going to get out about me. So, Drea, I always believe that, and I say this every time that I have my guests on and who are doing amazing things, right? And I always say there's always a story before the story.
Mm.
There's always a story and a turning point that changed your life that just from, okay, this is what happened to me. And once I get through that, how am I going to now change that and use it to help other people? And so, who is Drea at your earliest, that you can remember, and what was that initial incident, should I say, that kind of changed your life? And then after you got through it, was like, all right, now I'm going to use this story to help other people.
Man, I think there's a lot of different points in which, something, the Lord has done something with my broken place. But if you ask me who I was, it depends on, again, what stage in my life. When I
Mhm.
was much, much younger, I was a very quiet, tender hearted, like no confrontation, probably a good candidate for being bullied, actually. Like, if you want my lunch
Mhm.
here, just take the lunch
Yeah.
and go. Like, I was a very deep feeling child, and I just didn't like a lot of chaos, and I didn't like a lot of conflict. However, I think as I kind of went through life a little bit more, and especially I think this was um, definitely because of the parent child relationship that I experienced, I grew to be a little bit more hardened and
Mhm.
probably became a little bit combative. I walked with a lot of hurt feelings, a lot of offense. Um, there was a time in my life when I would fight a lot, actually. One might not believe it, but I would fight a lot. And that was just because I just did not have the right way to communicate what I was struggling with at home and with my parents and whatnot.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit because um, one of the things that I do, of course, I got the Girl Dad Discussions
Hmm.
podcast, right? And so I wrote an ebook called the Four Core, which is the four core values that every daughter should receive from her father. And
Mm.
so the statement that you just made just hit a couple things that kind of triggered me a little bit. And one of the things you said was not being able to, I guess, express yourself the way that you should, because it wasn't coming from the home, it wasn't necessarily that way. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I talk about in that ebook, when we dealing with protection, which is one of the core values that I believe every daughter should get from her father, but I changed the word from protection to safety. And one of
Mm,
the main things that I speak on when I'm talking about that safety is creating a safe space for your child to be able to express who she is, and stand in her truth as far as being who she is, being able to voice her own opinion, being able to speak up for herself and advocate on behalf of herself, in whatever situation. But I
right.
know that that starts at home, especially with our daughters. As a father, I think that's mainly our job to really mold them. Of course, the mom does too, but I think it's kind of the opposite. Like you have the girl dads, and then you have the boy moms, right?
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
kind of how it works, I guess. I don't know. That's I think that's how God set it up.
Yeah.
Where the father is like the one who's molding and really putting that those things into place. So you mentioned about not necessarily having that in your own household. How did that really affect you? And how did you even kind of find your voice? I know it probably was down the line a little bit,
Mm,
but
very much on the line.
how did that kind of play out in your story?
Yeah, I think, again, anytime we are looking at who we were or how we were, I think the most important place to first look is at our childhood. I don't know if you can think of a
Mhm.
more important place,
Yeah.
but I struggle to. And for me, I would say there was very, very different expectations of me for my father and for my mother. So if I start with my father, for whatever reason, when I was born and I was young, I had something inherently in me that desired to love him and that just had this expectation to receive love and to receive protection from him. No, he didn't give me a reason to expect that,
Mm.
but there was something inherently in me that expected that. So, and sometimes I question, like when I go down the line here on the story, sometimes I question God to say, how would you allow me to love a person so much that could not reciprocate that? But nonetheless, I think even at a point, I favored my dad over my mother. And this was when I was very young and naive and whatnot. And if there were anything to go down between my parents, guaranteed in my head, it's my mom's fault. Like there was just this deep
Mm.
love I had for him. And it's unfortunate because he couldn't reciprocate that. My father was a very complicated man. He was a very hard man. He was a very, he's a very smart man, but he was very unkind with his words. And he was not very giving with his heart, and he was not very giving with his finances. And I say none of this to dishonor my father. This is just what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was here, when he was alive, he would admit he was not the greatest dad, and that's okay. But again, there was something in me that just I had this expectation. Where did that come from? I don't know. But he found it very difficult to reciprocate love, and he was very, very impactful to how I perceived myself in terms of, how worthy I felt I was, how smart I felt I was. I didn't think I was smart. I didn't think I was deserving. I didn't think I was capable of doing very much. I didn't think I was cute. He was very focused on like weight and things like that. And so if you put on the least little bit of weight, he's going to be the first one to tell you, oh, you're getting fat. And it was a very destructive relationship. And to experience that from a very young age coming up, who else, if your father's saying these things about you, and if your father believes these things about you to be true, why wouldn't you believe it? He's your dad, right? So
Yeah.
I struggled with that for a very, very, very long time. Um, I think where my mom was concerned, I had kind of, because my father didn't live with us after like the age of 7, I think I had different expectations. I just expected her to cook and to make sure there was a shelter overhead, clothing, and all that. But I also did expect her to nurture. I did expect that and to be fair. And again, the nurturing side, because at one time I was very, very tender, I was very soft. So I needed her to kind of nurture that side of me. But my mom, unfortunately, for her own reasons, she was also very hardened. She was, a little hot tempered. Um, Definitely rough around the edges, and she wasn't all that fair when it came to like my sister and I. So that generated its own set of issues because there was, favoritism and sibling rivalry that, we were robbed, my sister and I, of many good years of like what should have been sibling goodness, right? But she had her own, my mom had her own challenges.
Hmm.
I've come to understand that more today. And I say none of this to dishonor her either. It just was.
Yeah.
So with all of this, I didn't have, I had a lot of gaps because you might think, what you're not getting from dad, maybe mom can buffer some of that a little bit, but I didn't have that. So what I had was a very distorted lens of who I was. What I had was a lot of hurt feelings and carrying around a lot of offense and a lot of anger. And so I moved through life looking through that distorted lens, and I moved through life with a lot of anger sitting on my chest, right? And I
Mhm.
made a lot of bad decisions as a result of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? So I'm listening to you, and it's crazy because I don't know. I don't think you bought the my ebook, but
I didn't know about it until now.
but it is. I'm listening to you when you're describing your relationship with your father, right? And so you mentioned several things. You mentioned him talking about your weight and not being loving, not necessarily protecting you, and as you're talking, I'm listening. I'm like, man, those are the values that you're supposed to get from your father.
Yes.
So in my ebook, the four values is affirmations, love
Hmm.
and affection,
Hmm.
protection, and guidance. Those are
Yeah.
the four main values. And I'm listening to you talk, and I'm like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to get from your father.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned about not even knowing why you loved him so much. But
Hmm.
I think that's kind of inherent
It
with
is.
our daughters. I just think we're there. Like I said, I think it's that cross. I think that's the way God kind of made us to have that cross, that cross love for each other. So it's
Hmm.
like our daughters glean for their father's attention and the sons kind of glean for the mom's attention. And I think God purposely did that for his own reasons.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, so we raise our kids or should raise our kids with a sense of guidance, a sense of love, a sense of affection, and protection, especially for our daughters as fathers. And I don't know if you know my whole story about even how I got into podcasting. Um, Going through my journey, I'll make it real quick. Going through my journey, I came to a part of my life where um, I realized that every woman I had ever dated was a fatherless daughter. And so realizing that, I said, well, let me see how I can help this community. And so I started a page on Instagram called Friends to Fatherless Daughters, and just giving my opinion as a father. For one, I have one biological child, which is my daughter. She's going to be 21 now. And as a friend to fatherless daughters, and also as a brother, because I have five sisters. So watching
Hmm.
my dad raise my sisters. And so I started this um, Instagram page called Friends to Fatherless Daughters, and just giving my opinion, from a father and from a man on some of the issues that fatherless daughters face, and was asked to be on podcasts and things like that. So that kind of started my whole podcast journey, right? Um, but in that, going through that journey is when I wrote the ebook, the core four. And it just amazing because we are talking, and you just kind of like talked about everything that you're supposed to get. You know what I
Wow.
mean?
It saddens me because there will be times when I actually try to truly, I dig very deep to try to reflect back and think of, let me just find something good that dad taught me.
Mm,
I struggle. Like the things that I kind of walked away with was, don't ask men for anything because if I were to ask him for something, honestly, I'd be on pins and needles because I know the response was not going to be a gentle
mm,
and loving, kind one. You know what I mean?
right.
Don't ask men for anything. I learned, to be very, almost become a bit of a perfectionist because he's so critical. So I still carry a bit of that today. Like if I'm working on anything, I will literally, there should be like an 80-20 rule. I'm looking to make sure like 100%. And I've had
Mm,
to let go of that a little bit. But he's taught me to be very critical, not only of myself, but like of others and the things I'm doing and whatnot. He's taught me, not to really strive for too much because I'm not capable of too much. He's taught me a lot of things that you really just don't want to be, you don't want to be
Right.
taught.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I could probably run through a lot of lists, but what I wish I could find is just like, I just want to have like a good memory of something that he sat down and said, daughter, you should handle your finances this way, or something constructive. And I
Mhm.
cannot, God forgive me if I'm
Mhm.
missing it, but I can't find it. I
Yeah,
reflect on this often.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, it's no disrespect to your father or your mom, in that case, because I know, I remember, I'm sure you know who E.T. the hip hop preacher is, Eric Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe heard of him, and so in his book, um, UOU, I think it's the UOU book, he talks about, uh, when he was writing the book, getting to a chapter where he was kind of conflicted about some things that happened because the people who did those things, it's like he was still connected to them and he still cared about them. And so he was kind of conflicted about, man, I don't know if I should tell this story. And
Yeah.
so one of his advisors was like, well, did it happen? And he said, yeah. He said, what's the truth? He said, yeah. He said, well, you should feel comfortable in telling it because when we talk about even Joseph, the story of Joseph, you can't tell the story of Joseph without talking about his brothers,
Yeah.
right? Because that's how it all starts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It all starts with it. And actually, you can even go back farther and say it all started with his father, right?
Mm-hmm.
Showing favoritism and all of that to him, which kind of made the gap
Brother.
between
Yeah.
his brothers. So, but if we're afraid to tell those parts, it leaves out a huge part of the story. And
Yeah.
it's no disrespect to any of them if it's the truth, because the truth is just the truth. And so one of the things that I heard you mention was about decision making, and
Mm-hmm.
how I think even your upbringing kind of reflected your decision making. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the book, the core four, I talk about guidance, and that's one of the things that I definitely believe that as a father, we're supposed to give our daughters, right? Teach them how to make wise decisions and also to make decisions out of facts and not feelings, right? To be able to separate, okay, this is how I feel about this, but let me separate my feelings from it to be able to look at the facts of it and make those kind of decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
not only that, but I also believe that it's our job to teach our daughters how to make the best decisions, right? So it's not always good and bad, because it might be a good decision, but it might be something that's better. So I always give the example of my daughter when she came to me and she said, Dad, I want to buy my first car. So I'm saving up my money, and I want to have this big down payment. So my notes don't be that high, which is a good decision. That was
Mm-hmm.
very good. But as a father, I have to say, well, what's the best decision? And so I'm like, well, how about we work on your credit, make sure you got perfect credit so you can keep your money in your pocket and just sign your name and drive out. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And so it's those little things that, along that way of guiding our daughters into making those decisions and how to separate, the good from bad, So uh in your case, you mentioned about, having trouble even making those decisions. So how did that kind of work out, with the decisions that you made, and how did you kind of bounce back from from that space of let me figure out how to make these wise decisions after making
Mm-hmm.
whatever mistakes that we all
But
have
the
made.
grace of God, because I made several not so sensible decisions. And what I can also say about myself is, and I've recognized it more and more as I've grown, I've allowed myself to grow closer to God. He's never been
Mhm,
far from me, I've been far from him.
mhm,
I understand how he speaks to me now. He's always spoken to me. But back then, I would always doubt. So even if I felt something in my spiritual gut, like, yeah, no. I would just kind of, I could be easily swayed to just kind of be influenced by what I'm seeing
Mm-hmm.
even though what I'm seeing is ridiculous, and I know God is telling me something else. I'd be like, no. Like I never received guidance on making decisions. It took a lot of life experiences and a lot of breaking to get me to where I am today. That's
Yeah.
the honest truth. I can never say there was like a mentor that was in my life, or a particular counselor or something like that. It literally was a bunch of life experience. Um, the conversation that you were describing with your daughter about buying a car, I've never experienced that. I guarantee you, as you described the conversation, I'm thinking to myself, if I went to my dad and said, "So, Dad, I'm thinking of buying a car," his first thing is to be like, "So, what are you telling me for? You think I'm gonna help you pay for it?" Like that would be the response I would expect. So when you're
Right.
describing that, I'm like, "Oh, that's so nice." Like anytime I'm around or I hear about a good father-daughter story, or when I'm around people who have good fathers, and I see that interaction, it's odd, but it makes me feel uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
because I so adore it. And I'm like, wow, I wish I had that. But something in me feels like I should be like leaving the room. Like it's like it's
Yeah.
almost foreign to me. Although I would have loved to experience it. If I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I do exactly,
Yeah.
because it's like it's not your experience, so it's
No.
kind of like you're not a part of the club, sort of.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so
So
it's
you're
like,
just
all
like, should
right,
I
so
just
maybe,
leave
yeah,
like the room?
this is where
But
I get off at, you know.
yeah. But yeah, like there was no the breaking moments. Like I said, I had several before I really, and each time I had a breaking moment, and God faithfully, produced something that I can learn from it.
Hmm.
I got a little bit better. Now I think I'm closer to being, where I want to be, um, than ever before, and that's just from my last breaking, which was actually marrying someone that my father said absolutely, like he couldn't. He's like, if you marry that man, I'm cutting you out of my will. Like he was so adamant that that's not the one. But I did it because the person that I chose to have, my children with, he was so similar to my dad. Like that was my
Hmm.
longest relationship ever. And I ended up picking someone very similar to my
Right.
dad. And it like at the time you don't recognize exactly why you're doing it. But later on I recognized, because I actually wanted my dad's approval. I'm thinking this is someone he'll be like, yeah, girl, like
Yeah.
you've done something right. But the truth is the relationship was not good. And in fact, my children's father has his own, I'm sure, challenges from his childhood. And I think it was like putting two broken
Hmm.
people together. And back when you're young, you don't realize what a disaster that is until you start going through it. But even in
Right.
going through it, I knew I didn't enjoy the relationship, but it still felt somewhat normal to me because the way
Right.
my mother and father interacted. So you're just like, you're just going to go through it. I'm having these children with this person. I'm going to stay here forever. I don't care. But God delivered me from that situation, and he gave me two beautiful sons. And when I left that situation, and the Lord gave me the permission to do it. It's a long story, but he gave me the clearance to do it. And when he did, my life started moving along very smoothly. Although, that person did try to create a lot of havoc in my life in my departing, but
Hmm.
nonetheless, the Lord truly brought me through it. So I said, great. But now, um, I met a person, or I had met a person at that time that was to the complete opposite. He was
Hmm.
not super ambitious. He was not the corporate guy. He was not anyone my father would be like, yeah, this is a smart guy. This is a decent guy. I like this guy. I can get behind this guy. Completely different. He was very quiet. I'm not going to say he was not the most articulate. He was not, there was many things that he was not, but he was seemingly very, very nice. And that niceness was also backed by his sisters, which I knew. So I thought, you know what? I've gone the other way, the
Right.
smart, the corporate, the this and that, and the other. Maybe sometimes you just got to get behind someone who maybe doesn't have all these other things and the finances and whatever, but they have a good heart. So maybe they just need a good person backing them. And
Hmm.
what more can you ask for?
Right.
But so that choice was made to kind of get completely to the other end of, what I had experienced before and what my dad was like.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably turned out to be an even bigger disaster in the
Mm-hmm.
end. And I was very adamant when my dad said, if you marry this person, I'm cutting you out. He even told me, if you don't get a prenup, I'm cutting you out. And I was like, I'm not getting a prenup. Nope, I'm not doing none of that because I believe in this. And I didn't even want to hear what my father had to say, but he ended up being right,
Right.
which was so sad. It was so sad, but he ended up being right. So again, like a lot of my decisions, and I recognize it later on, you know, I was coming from a very, like looking through a very distorted lens. Although the lens was getting clearer and clearer as I go through each phase in my
Mm-hmm.
life, it was still a little bit foggy. What's the word? Foggy?
Okay. Yeah, that's
Back
it.
then. All right.
Yeah.
So it's clearer now.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of clear, right? So I'm listening to your story, and you're talking to using the acronyms of being broken a lot, and taking that broken and then talking about things getting clearer.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about your organization, Glass Houses and Paper Mache Lives.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like it fits right in there with the clear lenses and the broken. You know what I mean? So now we have this glass house. So tell us a little bit about that.
So glass houses for me is, again, of course, glass being something that is easy to shatter, but it is also about transparency.
Yeah.
So with me, I'm very transparent, which is very odd for someone like me because I was not raised to be very vocal. I was not raised to be, transparent and talk your business out in the streets and things
Mhm.
like that. So this is a very strange space for me. So the glass kind of represents, again, that, ability to shatter, also the transparency. The house is just representative of us, our lives. And then the paper mache is, and I don't know if you're familiar with paper mache, but paper in itself, like you tear it easy.
Right.
But paper mache, when you take paste and you start kind of forming this thing, it makes it a little bit more sturdy, a little bit hard.
Hmm.
That to me is the other aspect of life where instead of just dealing with things, dealing with our fragility, dealing with our truth, we just try and find things to kind of wrap it up in
Hmm.
and strengthen it with. But it's really not all that strong because inside we're still just that fragile piece of paper.
Right.
So that's where glass houses and paper mache lives came from.
So what do you actually do with that movement? Um, because I know I definitely want to get into talking about your devotionals.
Hmm.
But even with that, because it is a program. Am I correct?
So not yet. So that is my like overarching company name.
Hmm.
And then beneath that, I have what I'm trying to form, which is the undressing movement. So that's the undressing journal.
Hmm.
And then also I have the Broken Beautifully brand, which is again trying to encourage people to allow the brokenness, but allow it in a way that will allow them to be transformed. And a lot of that has to do with faith.
Yes.
That is really the crux of it, to be honest. But I think anyone who's going to be promoted to something good is going to have to go through a breaking, and it's going to feel like the worst thing you've ever been through in your
Mhm.
entire life. But if you just have faith in God to do what He can do, and only He can do in that situation, my God, you'll be surprised at how
Yeah.
you come out. And
Yeah.
people will all be looking at you wondering, how are you still standing up? And that is the reason why. His
Yeah.
grace,
Yeah.
His
And
power.
I that's one of the things that I've been talking a lot about, maybe within the last couple of months, is just that, because even with where I am now, this has probably been, excuse me, it's probably been a good 2 3 year journey, to me doing this, right? To going from a person definitely had ideas and concepts and things like that, but not necessarily moving on any of them. Just, going to work. I'm a bricklayer by trade, so get up, go to work, take care
Mhm.
of the family, all of that. Then definitely going through a transition, from number one being married to being divorced, and that was his own thing, and going through that journey to now being podcaster, a speaker, author of several ebooks. Just the whole journey within this short time period. But
Yeah.
it definitely started from an event that it was just like, oh, this event could be the thing that ruins a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
That like a turning point that could be a downward spiral.
Yeah.
But God used it to lift me up, should I say, to a whole different, aspect of who I am now. And so this last couple of years, not years, but the last couple of months, even in my testimony and talking to people, I've been very vocal. Like, I don't even care what happens to me, right? Because one of the things that I've learned through all the things that I've been through in the last 2 years, the
Mm-hmm.
triumphs and the trials, is everything is working for my good, right? And I always say, do you really believe that? Because we say it, we quote that all things work for the good of those that love the Lord.
Yeah.
Then I say, well, that means all things. So even those things that could be considered bad is still working for your behalf. And definitely this whole journey that I'm on now started from something that was bad. It actually started with my divorce, right? And that's no hit or anything to my ex-wife. We're actually
Mm-hmm.
very good friends, and that's a whole nother story within itself. But we're actually very good friends, and we're cool. So it had nothing to do with her, but the divorce of the breaking of our marriage and the breaking of the things that I went through in that time period pushed me into everything that I'm doing now.
Amen. Yeah.
So I very much agree with you that, if you're going to go anywhere, if God is going to lift you up to anything, there's going to be a period of some unbreaking. There's going to be some period of some breaking some stuff up. So you have to say, like, okay, what am I going to do? Either I'm going to depend on me or I'm going to depend on him. Right. And so when you depend on him, that's when you start seeing things change. When you depend on you get what you get.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why I think, again, I had so many different seasons of breaking, because if I were to think back to some of the younger day breakings, I was still doing things in my own strength. Like, you hurt me and I'm going to seek my own vengeance, and I'm going to be like devoted to making sure I make your life a living hell. So like each time I had to learn to surrender a bit more. It was in this divorce now that I have received a breaking that I never expected. It came so many aspects of it that's its own probably 1 hour discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But so many aspects of it I just never imagined. And I sat down there and I said, God, I don't even understand why I'm here. I don't understand why this is happening. I believe I did the right thing. I believe I tried to be a good wife. I believe I'm sitting down going, and then I'm thinking about all aspects of my life, like from my younger days coming back up. It's like I had this whole moment of reflection, but I tried to do nothing in my own strength. I just said, I give up. Like, I give it to you, because none of this, what is happening right now, makes any sense to me. It made no sense to my family. It made no sense to anyone who loved me. It was crazy. But it is through that you and I are sitting here talking, that I've met the people that I've met, that I've done some of the discussions that I've done, that I've created this devotional journal, that I've created this Broken Beautifully, that God gave me glass houses and paper mache lives. It is through that. And that was like I could say I fully surrendered. I fully surrendered. If he said, Andrea, you're never going back in that house again, I said, okay. If he said, Andrea, whatever's been stolen from you, let it go, I said, okay. If he said, you know what, that man's going to take this money, don't argue it anymore, let it go, I said, okay. I just said, okay. That was it. And I've never felt more free. I've never felt more proud of myself. I've never felt more connected to God.
Yeah.
I've never, like, my spiritual life has grown. It still has a ways to go, but everything has just grown. My relationship with my mom, complete 360. We've never experienced this type of joy and appreciation for one another in all our other years before. My sister and I, the same thing. There's so many things that have come out of that breaking, out of that evil day season, that I don't feel like, sometimes like my friends will look and they'll be like, you've been through a lot. And it's like, I have. But you know what? I'm truly, when I say I'm truly okay, I have the days where I'm a little bit sad. I'm thinking, wow, I can't believe that happened. But they're short-lived. I truly surrendered, and I'm watching what God is doing. And I just say, use me as the vessel, because I know you did not allow me to go through all of these different things without a purpose. So
Yeah.
that means I have to come on here and embarrass myself and talk about all this stuff. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. But it's all part of the journey, right? And so even in my journey, God gave me a quote, and I quote it often. And I even made a shirt on it, and it's actually even on the front of my purpose journal and my excuse me, the purpose planner. And the quote that he gave me was, pain births progress.
Mm-hmm.
Progress births purpose. And no, pain births purpose. Purpose births progress. And progress is the evidence that God is at work. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I was going through my whole thing, like I said, my whole thing started from my divorce and everything I was going through at that time. Again, like you said, feeling like, oh, it's like the end of the world. And feeling that pain, but out of that pain birthed, everything that I'm doing now. Because like I said, coming out of that was because one of the things, let me just say this, coming out of that, and what made me realize that every woman I've ever dated was a fatherless daughter, because that was kind of where our issues were. Because I was raised in a 2-parent household, my dad and my mom, but every woman I've ever dated was a fatherless daughter, including my ex-wife. And so that's kind of where we were butting heads at, which caused a lot of tension in our marriage. So coming out of that, which was a painful place, but coming out of that and recognizing my connection to that community of fatherless daughters, starting the Instagram page of Friends of Fatherless Daughters, then people start calling me to be on their podcast and asking me to come on a guest. And I think by now, I think I've done like 30 episodes of guest episodes, most of them is talking about parenting for the most part, and then talking about fatherless daughters, and then even meeting with one of those hosts that had me on their podcast in person. We had lunch, and he was like, "You should have your own podcast." And so that's got my wheels to turning into that. And here we go. Here we are, 130 some episodes later. So it's that pain again that bursts that purpose. Like, okay, I'm going to take this pain and I'm going to use it to help other people. And then when you're just like, God, is this really you? If you're walking in it, He gonna give you a little bit thing, one little thing at a time. You know what I mean? So from in my testimony, from starting the Friends of Fatherless Daughters and connecting with the fatherless daughters that were able to commented on my page on different things that I said, was like, this helped me and thank you for this and things like that, to the next step for people just calling the first person just called me out the blue, just like, hey, would you like to be on my podcast? I'm like, I didn't even know what a podcast was. I heard about it. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, and but then from that one podcast, I think I did like 7 in a row, just like back to back, before I even got to the space where I had the conversation about starting my own podcast. But it's just that track record. But it started from this place of pain. But then God, again, using that pain for our purpose, and you will be able to track it, track the steps as you go along, as long as you're walking in the purpose that He has for you.
Exactly.
And I believe that you are definitely walking in that purpose. And before we get out of here, I want to talk about the devotional, the undressing, because that is how I actually came across you. I don't remember whose live you were on, but you were on live. Had to be somebody I was following. Huh?
I think it was Saya.
Yes, that's who it was, because Saya was on. She's been a guest on the podcast, and so of course, I'm following her, and I seen you guys on there talking about the undressing journal. So tell us a little bit about, first of all, tell us even about that journey that even led you to write that, and then how instrumental can this journal be in the lives of those who take the time to partake in it?
So I think you had someone on the show the other day. Was it Veronica Spencer?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. When I was listening to her describe her process of when she started putting pen to paper, it was very similar to that. So again, all of this happening during my season of breaking. And during that time, I used to spend a lot of time walking and talking to God, just saying, I'm going to need to hear from you, please, because I don't understand what's happening. And he planted some things on my spirit. And I don't know if I negotiated it down to how I did this, but he told me I'm going to help people. In my head, though, I'm thinking my kids, because I need to make sure they understand why I've gone through what I've gone through and how I got here and so on. I wasn't really thinking much beyond that. I'm going to be honest. And I know he planted in my heart a book. I don't know if I kind of reduced it down to the journal and negotiated it down. I'm not sure. But I can honestly tell you, I've never had an aspiration to write anything. It's just not my thing. And, as funny as it might be, like the people who have been with me all my life, they say, you should actually write a story or you should write a movie. Like your life could be a movie, because I've had so many breaking seasons that if you're not there with God yet, you might not understand it. And nonetheless, I was walking and he planted this on my heart to do. And so one day I just said, I'm going to just sit down. I sat down at the kitchen table, and it was morning and then it was night. And I just kind of went on like that for days. And then I would get up and just go stay at a hotel for a couple of nights. Same thing. I'd be from morning to actually set up at the hotel, just flowing and remembering things from childhood. And just at first it was like a very long document because it was just things flooding. And it was very therapeutic. I'm going to tell you the truth. I was crying like the things just happened the day before. And it was just a moment of just me and God, and hoping that he will help me process and understand all that has transpired over my life. So that's kind of how it went. Like when I watched that discussion you guys had, I'm like, I understand what she's saying, because it was kind of that thing. You're just there, and it's like you're in the spirit or something. It's just flowing. But yeah, this is my own copy, because I walk with a journal everywhere I go, because I believe in journal writing. But undressing really is just talking about my wardrobe of not so flattering garments. And it starts from childhood, and where I've had to carry guilt, where I've had to carry rejection, how I've had to carry, hurt feelings and anger, and each garment kind of layering the other one to ultimately just, again, be a part of why I've made some ridiculous decisions. And I own those decisions. I don't make up excuses. I've made those decisions. I own them. But really what I hope Undressing will do is, again, just show people, because if they knew my personality, they would know this is not in my nature to do. And if we can just face the truth, if we could just allow ourselves to be vulnerable, if you can see how much foolishness I've done and experienced, maybe you too will be willing to tap into your own undressing. And that's the movement that I want to come out of this. I just want people to start undressing. A lot of us are walking around here looking like we're fine, but we're not. We're clothed in the cutest of outfits, but underneath it all, we're not. Right? And how many breakings do we need to happen before we just surrender and say, I'm going to face the truth? Because like you say, deal to heal. Unless we face that truth, unless we deal with it, we're not healing anything. Right? So I think at best, that's what I want to do. Encourage people to just tap into that place of vulnerability, tap into that truth, and face it once and for all. And then the journaling aspect, again, journaling, I'm an advocate of it. I love it. I've done it since I was young. Get your thoughts out on paper. Get your prayers out on paper. Get your plans out on paper. Write the vision, make it plain. I believe that.
Yeah, that's it.
In due time, it will manifest itself through God's grace and power. And retention. A lot of times we're not retaining things like we used to, but when I write it out, a whole lot better. So I'm very big on journaling. So I'm kind of glad I went this route, even if I negotiated down to.
Well, that's just the first edition. That's just the first edition. So, Drea, I want to say thank you so very much for coming on and for sharing your story with us and your expertise. I want you to have the last word, and I want you to leave my listeners with your social media handles and things like that you want to share, and also definitely let them know where they can get your book. And I want you to leave us with last word of inspiration, motivation, however you feel. something that you want to leave the listeners with. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that. While you're thinking about it, to my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Make sure you guys are checking out our websites. Again, our main website, or my main website, or company website, should I say, is the dealhealfulfill.org. Again, that's dealhealfulfill.org, which is our mission, right? And so you can go there, find out everything that we have going on, and also find out how you can contact me in order to come out to be a speaker or to do a workshop for you guys. Also, go to Deal to Heal Tees. That's Deal, the number two, healtees.com. And that is our inspirational shirt line. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That is our tagline. And not only can you find inspirational tees there, but you also can find podcast merch. So we have our t-shirts, our podcast t-shirts for the Deal to Heal podcast, as well as the Girl Dad Discussions podcast can be purchased there. And last but not least, our ebooks. You can go to ebooks by ejames.com. Again, that's ebooks by ejames.com. And we talked about the four core, which is the four core values that every daughter should get from her father. That is there. But I didn't forget about our sons. There also a book there called From Males to Men, which is a male mentoring, short male mentoring book for young men making that transition into manhood, as well as some other ebooks that are there too. So you can go to ebooks by ejames.com. I made it really simple so you guys can go there and check those things out. Also, over the last couple years, 2 years, I think it's been. I've been blessed to be a part of a organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And what we do, we have free virtual workshops every quarter of the year, talking about forgiveness, what it is, what it's not, who is it for, forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, even forgiveness of the world. And so we address a lot of issues and a lot of topics surrounding around forgiveness, which I think is a very important topic that we have. So those workshops are free. You can go to forgivenessmission.com in order to register for it, or you can just go to Eventbrite and look up forgiveness workshop, and you should be able to find it there. Again, that's forgivenessmission.com. We have those free virtual workshops every quarter of the year. I think this year we actually went to every other month. I think that's where we're at now. So whenever you're listening to this, either one just ended or one is coming up. So just go to forgivenessmission.com or go to Eventbrite to forgiveness workshop. Look up forgiveness workshop, and the organizer is the Forgiveness Mission, and you'll be able to register for those free virtual workshops. Last but not least, I told you guys that I would tell you how you can win $100 from the podcast. And you can win $100 from the podcast by being one of our super subscribers. What does that mean? That means you must first subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our Facebook page, and to our podcast on Spotify. After you've done those three things, you text the word WIN, WIN, to the number 866 326 0730 to qualify to win $100. The contest is ongoing and is random. So once you're in, you can always win. You don't ever have to re-up. And make sure when you text the word WIN, WIN, to the number 866 326 0730, you also send your contact information so that we'll be able to contact you to let you know if you are our $100 winner. We have people that's texting the word WIN, but you don't leave us no other information besides that. So we don't know who you are or how to contact you if you are our winner. So make sure that you leave your contact information when you enter our super subscriber contest, and you might just win $100 from the podcast. So that being said, Ms. Drea, again, I definitely appreciate you being on. I appreciate you sharing your story. I want you to have the last word, so the floor is yours.
Maybe my last word would be what I would share with like a younger version of myself. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. I would tell her, and I would tell anyone like her, to find a mentor. I would tell them to find God. I would tell them counseling is okay. In fact, it is more than okay. And I would say if you have to love somebody from a distance for your own well-being, that is okay too. And then for those of us who are a little bit more seasoned in life, we need to stop walking around like tomorrow's promised, because it is not. So if your life is not looking the way you want it to look today, it's time to start taking some action today, because tomorrow is not promised.
All right.
That's what I would say.
Okay. You want to leave us with your social media handles and also where we can get the book, the journals?
Okay. So social media handles, the Drea Lenore, and that's on Instagram, and that's also on TikTok. It's also going on YouTube, but we're still a work in progress there. But it is the Drea Lenore. The website is www.ghpmlives.com. And then the journal in the US is available on Amazon.com. And then the journal in Canada is available through the website.
All right. All right. Can't end it no better than that. To my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help people to deal, to heal, and to fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed. Hey guys, I know you're enjoying the podcast. However, don't forget to join our text line at 866-326-0730. That's 866-326-0730 in order to receive text messages with new events and things that is going on and new episodes as they release. All right, see you in a minute. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.